Hi everyone, this is Raz Koren. I'm posting this video as our assignment to interview a local person. Hello David Shalita.
Hey Raz, how are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing quite well.
You're one of the most prominent libertarian activists in Israel, and I thought it would be very nice maybe to share a bit about the libertarian and liberal activism in Israel. Can you tell us a bit how it started, what you do today, what are the main issues that we're dealing with?
Sure. Well, first of all, the libertarian discussion in Israel is mostly an economical and social discussion, which is very unusual in Israel. Most of the political discussion in Israel revolves obviously around the conflict, which is something that has enabled for quite a few, I'll say, economical and social anomalies as far as the way that the Israeli government is treating its citizens. So, yes, so that reflects in a way that there are all sorts of things in Israel that are not questioned in any way and are perceived as completely normal. That would probably be, that are highly unusual when you look at other economic systems that operate in the world. One of them is the mandatory draft that we have in Israel. In Israel, we are the only country in the world that drafts all, mostly all boys and girls who finish high school. So that means that our draft does for 3 years without salaries, which means that our draft is not per quota. It's not as if the Israeli army needs a certain amount of soldiers and then they draft according to that. They just draft anyone, just draft everyone, and that's something that is highly unusual now. There's also the state ownership of land. I think is up to 93% in Israel. Also, there's no other country that's even similar to that. And all of these strange anomalies are mostly due to the conflict. The political discussion in Israel seems to revolve mostly around how we address Arabs, how we address our neighbors and our enemies and in our wars. Now, up to 2011, the discussion in Israel was pretty much solely addressed to these issues, the conflict issues, and in 2011 Israel had its somewhat of an Occupy Tel Aviv protest. No, actually it was all around Israel. So that's something that started in Rothschild. People just started tenting up. They built tents against they did this in protest of the prices of real estate in Israel. And again, I'd like to note that 93% of the lands are owned by the state, but they decided for some reason that government intervention is something that could solve that issue, so they started that. And again, the political discussion in Israel is really so poor and so simplified that what they did is that they circulated the protest just around the social and economical issues. And obviously they were pushing towards more regulations and things of that sort.
Were you personally a part of that protest?
Right. So the thing is, I wasn't back then. Let me just like to finish off what I started about the protest. So it started in 2011. That's something that really aroused the social economical discussion in Israel. And after that, also the new the Israeli freedom movement started. And and that's basically when we started the libertarian activism. Now, I didn't take part in 2011. I have to admit, back then I was just your typical conservative right-winger. I was, and you know, it was kind of like a Pavlovic response. We saw the lefties starting a protest, so we said, you know, if whatever they're saying is wrong, and the claims are wrong, the solutions are wrong, everything they're saying are wrong, which is how the political debate typically is. If the left pushes something, the right reacts to it, reactionaries, as socialists call them. And it's
you're actually touching a very interesting point here. Would you say liberalism in Israel is more lefty, more righty, none of the above?
Right. So actually, I consider myself to be center. I don't consider myself to be a right winger or a left winger. But most of what is defined in Israel as liberal activism is right-wing activism. The reason being that really because the discussion in Israel about economics and social issues arose so lately, the right wing is really far behind as far as the economic discussions. So the mainstream right in Israel, the Likud movement, Abait HaYehudi, and the parties, even Israel Beitenu, they don't really have something that you could describe as right-wing policies on social and economic issues. They're mostly revolving around the conflict, and they have very little to say about it. So what is considered classical liberalism in Israel as far as activism is mostly a house to people who are right-wingers and also want to push moderate right-wing political and economical issues. So most of the classical liberalism in Israel is right-wingish.
So what would the lefties that's liberal, that wants less government, but also a two-state solution, and all the other lefty flags do?
Right. So a person who has these issues, yes, that has this world perception, I think would probably formally the Israeli freedom movement does not have does not address the conflict in any way. The Israeli freedom movement doesn't have any kind of positions that have to do with the conflict. Should lands be given? Should a two-state solution exist or anything like that? But there is another parallel movement which is called Chofesh Lekulanu, freedom to us all. It would translate to, and they also have they also have. First of all, they have positions on the conflict, which the Israeli freedom movement doesn't have at all. But their positions are also more, I'll say, if you take the spectrum of how Israelis believe that the conflict should be addressed, theirs is more of a left-wing ish views.
Okay. Some of the people in this training, people from Sudan, from other African countries, and we also in Israel have somewhat of foreign immigration, asylum seekers, refugees, work seekers, actually right here in our neighborhood.
That's right.
What would you say is the liberal way to treat them, to treat this, I don't know if problem is the right word, but the situation?
Right. So I'll say classical liberalism doesn't really have a consensus answer on this, because typically classical liberalism tends to go with very simple solutions. On the issue of immigration, it's a bit more complex. Now, so instead of giving you the classical liberal view on this, which I really can't, because I can tell you that there's all sorts of very radical classical liberals, people who are anarcho-capitalists and support what we call the no-state solution. So even people like that have a wide range of views as far as immigration. So I can't really give you a classical liberal view on it, but I can give you my own on Israel at least. I think that in Israel, we see that there's a way of people immigrating here due to the fact that living in Israel is significantly better for them than living in their origin countries. Whether it is because there is a war going on there, whether it is because there is a very hard kind of draft that goes on there, like there is in Eritrea, or if there is a war like there is in Sudan. But what we see typically in Israel, and it's always like that, it's a spectrum of how bad can it get and how good it is here. So if Israel would have been perfect, I don't know, for immigrants, or very attractive like Canada, Australia, or the United States, we'd probably be seeing people who come here stay no matter what. But what we see in Israel, which is suboptimal for most immigrants coming here, is some of them staying and some of them not staying, mostly depending on how well they manage to assimilate themselves or find a place for themselves in the Israeli society. So what we've seen is originally we've had a lot of northern Sudanese people coming here due to the conflict in Darfur. We saw that they didn't find their place, whether it's because of their ethnicity or whether it's because of their culture, but we found that they didn't find their place here, and the Israeli government kind of gave them a bit of a nudge. They gave them a cash opt-out, and they gave them money to return to Sudan, and most of them are not here anymore. We also, most of the what is described as the refugee community in Israel currently are people from Eritrea, which is currently not at war. They have a very strict draft, but we do see that they are more inclined to stay here because of the fact that they do find a place within Israeli society. I can tell you, as someone who's been living here in the neighborhood that most of them live in, that we find that they are good neighbors. We find that they are, as by the way, many conservative economists said all along, when you have people coming into a country and you don't have the welfare state intervening in the decision making that they make, you find that they find a place for themselves. They're hardworking. They're people who are family oriented. They are still family oriented because of the fact that they don't get any kind of welfare benefits. So, for instance, if an Eritrean woman is considering breaking up the family and becoming a single parent, then unlike an Israeli woman, she doesn't have the welfare state to encourage her to do it, and she finds herself less inclined to become a single parent. And when there's less single parenting, there's less crime, and there's also less poverty. So they tend to stick with their family units. They are churchgoers. They are religious people who visit church and keep that social construct as well. So that's something that's also going for them. They're also very hard workers. We find that they are quite inclined to working, and also they don't get unemployment or any kind of welfare. So they have to work, and if they have to work, then they work, and that makes people really that puts them in a better place in society. We also see that they are highly oriented towards entrepreneurship. They open their own businesses and things of that extent. So I'll definitely say that they make good neighbors.
Okay. The Israeli government has kind of an ignoring policy. They don't give them a legal status, but don't force the law. That's not that far from what Milton Friedman used to say, that you should that illegal immigrants are good for the economy as long as they say illegal. Would you agree with that? Do you think it's...
I have to say that, first of all, I'm not much of a Friedmanite. I'm not a big fan of Milton Friedman here. But I do have to say that on this point, as on many others, I'm inclined to agree with the late Professor Friedman, and that seems to make a lot of sense, because they're here, they don't get any kind of acknowledgement, and they work, they don't get welfare, they stick with their families, they stick with working, and these things tend to... Also, I think that this is a bit unfair, because we had the northern Sudanese community here, and they weren't doing as well as the Eritrean community. I also think that the fact that I think that the kind of culture that they came here that is more similar to ours, Eritrea, which used to be a part of Ethiopia, has always been a more they've always been unique, let's say, in the African atmosphere. Ethiopia, throughout all history, was not a typical African country. They were not a typical African state. They were quite established in as far as state in an early stage, and I think that we see that here in Israel, because they do seem to be doing better than other immigrations that we've had here. Now, as far as the solution, I like to say this: it's very hard for me to give you a solution that's good when you're looking far into the future, because I think that the future is very hard to predict. But I can tell you that as far as the short-term future, I think that I think that sending these people away from here, or evicting them, it's very hard for me to look at short-term effects for that act that will be positive. I think that if without them here, we won't see any kind of improvement in the situation of the neighborhood, like some people say, or the economic situation will definitely not improve. I don't think there will be less crime in the neighborhood or anything like that. It mostly has negative aspects, I think, in the short term. In the long term, I'm really not an expert on the issue.
Okay, we are here at the Austro-Somalia Institute, which you are the founder, the main founder. Proper disclosure, I also help in a little bit, but maybe you could tell us a bit about Austro-Somalia, the goals, the visitors that we've had.
Sure. As I said, I've been active in promoting classical liberalism in Israel. I'd say from just after the summer of 2011. So in late 2011, just around the primaries of the Republican Party, I became a classical liberal, following the preaching of Ron Paul. And I've been active in the Israeli freedom movement, as I said, since late 2011, maybe early 2012. And what we had in the what we had scattered through 2014-15 is something called lectures on the bar, which is something that is quite common in Israel, where you bring an expert on any issue, on any level of expertise, and it can be really something very wide range. It could be polyamorous relationships, it could be physics, it could be politics, philosophy, anything. So we'd have these people come to a bar and then discuss their expertise and explain them. And we had several people from the Israeli freedom movement give these lectures out. And what happened after a while is I've looked at these things, and I saw that they have a lot of, they're not really suitable for the kind of message that we're looking to give. With two major issues with that format. The first is that the lectures were too short. The bars give the lectures because they have kind of weak hours before people start coming into the bar. So what happened is the lectures were typically limited to 50 minutes, 90 minutes at most. And also, as far as the issues had to be quite moderate because it had to appeal to a certain crowd.
So wide audience.
Right. So what I wanted to do, and so that's one thing. We had these issues, and then another thing that we had is that in the Israeli freedom movements, we have this thing that the activists. It's first of all, it's a social circle. It's not only a political system, and that's where I met you, and also many of my friends. And
could you please elaborate about this? It's sort of a mixture to say that we're having a social circle with a political activity. Normally in the modern world, your friends are not the people you work with, are not the people you do sports with in a certain group. So that's a very interesting choice. Could you please explain on that?
Sure. I'll be honest with you. It's quite hard for me to tell you why it is, but it is the way it is in the Israeli freedom movement. And I don't know. I've never been active in any kind of politics besides for classical liberalism. But I can tell you that for some reason we stick together quite strongly. And it's interesting because it's quite an eclectic mix of people. We have religious people in our social group, and we have atheists, and we have gay people, and we have very conservative socially people, and we have people who come from families that have been in Israel for many generations, and we have people who come who came to Israel as immigrants themselves. So it's really a very wide and eclectic mix of people, but this social circle seems to take up a very big part of the activism. I think I'll say that there's probably about 50, 60, maybe 100 people that their major social circle is this classical liberal social circle, whatever. And because we are so tightly knit, what happened over time is that we've started taking up, also because of the fact that there's a large majority of us of young and single people, what we've started to do is start up flat shares. We started flats where only we live in. And in that situation, we started doing activism together, and there's, I'd say, probably about 5 or 6 of these flat shares of classical liberals, mostly classical liberals living in the house, mostly people active in the Israeli freedom movement or other Israeli freedom movements. And so I used to live in one of those flats for a while. There were I lived with my partner there, and there were another couple of roommates that were also activists. And I lived there for a while, and then our relationship ended, and I was looking for a new flat to start of that sort of having only people, only classical liberals living in it. And then I thought that there's an option for me to get a flat that's suitable for that, and also suitable for a solution for the lectures on the bar issue that I addressed earlier. So what we've done is we found the flat that we're living in right now. You can look at it. And it has a lot of common areas, so it's really quite comfortable for us to both do the lectures and also live together, which is also something that we seem to enjoy. So what we do, I've started this in 24th of July 2015. And I've been bringing all sorts of politicians and people who are experts on all sorts of issues, mostly political, but from all of the political spectrum. The Minister of Agriculture was here last week. We've had three of the current members of parliament have been here, and also a few ex-members of parliament, and mostly, so that's mostly what Ostra Somalia does. We also have a library operating in the premises, which lets people borrow books for free on issues of politics and philosophy and economics. And the plans for the future, what I'd like to do is transfer to a format where we do less lectures and more courses. I'd like to have people going through a series of lectures, for them to make some kind of a commitment to come to a series of lectures that connect together towards teaching them something that has larger value than just the lectures apart, a course, if you may, and this would be only on economics, of course, and get acknowledged from foreign institutions that teach these issues in other countries, as this being a branch of these research centers from the United States, specifically the Mises Center.
Okay. The Mises Center specifically?
Yes, the Mises Institute, excuse me.
Okay.
Yes, they teach Austrian economics there. They're the premier Austrian economics teaching of the world. And we are the Israeli major Austrian economics teaching center, so I'd like to be acknowledged as that. But we're quite far from that now.
So I have to ask you a personal question.
Sure.
You've mentioned that you weren't active politically before the liberal movement, and today you are, I think, the most prominent liberal activist.
Okay.
Why do you do it? What triggered you into it?
Right. So, okay. So I just want to kind of, I do want to put in a few notes to what you said in regard. I'd say I was quite politically aware, much more politically aware than the typical person, and I was interested, and I was a conservative and a right winger. And I was,
which is very untypical, by the way, because you grew up here in Tel Aviv.
Right. Yes, I grew up. My school. I always like to say this. On our senior year, we had the mock elections, and the Communist Party, out of 120 seats of the elections, 100 or 110 of the seats
That's
so
Chadash, right?
Chadash, right? So it's
Wow.
So the school is very left-wing oriented, and all of it's a public school, like mostly all the schools in Israel. But all of the prominent left-wing leaders, all of their children studied in our school. So Sheli Chimovich, Dov Hanin, although they are younger than me, the children typically they all they all learned in that school. So it's really a hardcore. Also the lowest draft rates, and it's really a very prominent left-wing school in Israel. And so I did that, and I'll be honest with you. Actually, my answer is quite cynical. The truth is, I saw it as just a jumping point to promote myself socially. I wanted to meet new friends. I saw that there's people there that have similar values, similar worldview, and I thought that this is a place where I could be popular and people would like me. And I found out that I found a lot of people that also dislike me, but that was mostly what it was. I think it was a way of making friends, and I'll be honest with you, I still see it mostly as that, as a way to promote myself and find and meet people and become liked and find people who are interesting and have common interests. So it's mostly that.
Okay, you said promote yourself, so I want to make it clear you're not making money out of it. It's just a social thing.
Yes. The promotion is only social. I meet people and it's mostly just that. Listen, I live with these people, and obviously I'd like to think that the setup that we have here is quite good, and it's a result of my social activism. But I think actually you've made a good point here that I would like to go a bit deeper into. We have to understand that as far as wealth, we have an inclination to think that if it can't be summed up in money, it's not wealth. But it really isn't the case. All of your social circle is a form of wealth. All of the way people look at you is also a form of wealth. If I'm active in a certain social and I can even to some extent do sum it in money, and I'll give you a bit of an example. Let's say that we're living here in this setup. I can tell you in comparison to the setup of the people that lived here before us is quite exquisite, and the people who lived here before us lived at a much lower standard of living and paid basically the same amount of rent. So just the fact that we have people here that we trust each other enough in order to have a common, or that we can pay together for things and buy services together, that's something that's valuable, and that's money and that's something that does have a value in money. And I'll give you a bit of an example. Just the fact that the rent that you pay here is first of all, the opportunity that you have to live here is an opportunity that's unique to people who are part of the social cycle. So as I said, the social cycle itself doesn't have a way to sum it in money, but the fact that you can live here is because of the fact that you're a part of this social cycle. And I would like to think that what we offer here must be better, and it's not a matter of me thinking it, your decisions show it. Yeah. You chose to live here. Obviously you had other options of living in other places. So that means that this option is more appealing. So that means that it must have some value. And that value is something that I've been working on quite a lot, so it's not really shekels that go into my account every month, but it definitely is something, in my opinion, that has value.
Okay, I couldn't agree with you more, by the way. Final question.
Sure.
We discussed briefly the fact that how the conflict influences the political debate in Israel.
Right.
And we cannot completely ignore the conflict, the Palestinians, the neighborhoods that we're living in, the Arab Spring, everything that happens around Israel. Would you say liberalism can offer anything to the area around us, to our relationships with the area around us?
Right, so also part of the reason that the Israeli freedom movement doesn't have views, and I also can tell you that I really try to say as little as I can about the conflict, because it really does take a very big part of the political discussion in Israel. I would say that this is definitely an issue that gets enough exposure, but of course I'll go out of my way and I will discuss the conflict a bit. So I can say a few things that are classical liberal, because there is, again, as on the issue of immigration, there isn't really a clear, very in consensus view, classical liberal view on how military conflicts need to be conducted, because really they are something that's at least in hope, something that is at least in the way we'd like for things to be, is quite should be quite scarce. All the issue of conflict, it's not something that takes part. Most of the people in the world, military conflicts don't take up a large part of their lives. But there are a few classical liberal issues that do stick out in Israel, and I think that in general Israel, at least between itself and the people that we have a conflict with, should allow trade to go on more freely. I think that...
You are referring to the blockade on Gaza?
No, I am referring... The blockade in Gaza is a result of the question of what kind of things come from the world into Gaza when they are allowed to operate freely. So there is an issue of asking ourselves whether the things that they are importing into the Gaza Strip are used in order to engage warfare towards Israel. So that means that we found, the Israeli government found in the past that they have been importing weapons and things that are meant for warfare. And obviously I can see why the Israeli government doesn't want its enemy to be able to acquire more weapons, and that is the formal explanation for the blockade. I'm referring to the relations between Israel and the Gaza, and also in Samaria. I think that there should be more trade, and Israel should allow more trade with those areas. And I can also say that this is a bit of a minor situation, but classical liberalism does say strictly to stay out of military conflicts that that are not necessary. And I can tell you that as far as the conflict with ISIS in Syria and Lebanon, I think Israel should take a very strong view on that side, as far as the first being the first policy that Israel needs to, well, it's not really initiate, I'd say probably it's doing right now and it should stop, is the providing aid to people, aid to people who are fighting in Syria. Israel is not a part of this conflict, and it should not want to become part of it. I think that Israel thinks that it's really giving, or thinks that it appears that we're giving foreign aid and healthcare to people who are fighting there and civilians and etc. First of all, I'm very skeptical that this is indeed the situation. As far as I'm concerned, it's probably some sort of a method of collecting intelligence. And I think that on their side, they're not that naive. I mean, I think that it's very important for Israel to portray to the world that we're helping and providing aid to Syria and to people fighting there, but I think that if people in the world are naive enough to believe that that is legitimate, that's their own thing. But I can tell you that as far as our relationship with the Arabs, with the people living in Syria and in Lebanon, I think that they are highly unappreciative of the fact that we are providing foreign aid, and they do see it in fact as an act of war. Israeli soldiers, as I say this, as I like to say, the object of an army is to fight. The objective of an army is to kill people. it's not to provide health care. And when we go there, when the Israeli army interferes in the things that are happening in Syria, we would like to think that the world thinks that we're doing them a favor, but I'm quite skeptical about it, and I'd like to think that people who know the conflict are quite skeptical as well. As far as the world, I'm really not aware, but definitely stop intervening in what happens in Syria. And I also think that another issue, actually this is quite funny, because this issue, the only members of parliament who who arose this issue are from the Communist Party, because that's what I like about classical liberalism, that because it is a center movement and not a right or left wing movement, we find ourselves agreeing on many issues with the moderate left, the moderate right, and the far right. It just depends on the issue. So one of the issues that arose that I think that need to be addressed by that need to be addressed by Israel is the policy of allowing American warships to fuel in Israel on the way to bombing Syria. So I think that because of the fact that Israel really is not a part of the conflict in Syria, it should not allow any countries that are in a war in that area to fuel here or to resupply or anything like that. I think that needs to be stopped immediately. We don't want the Syrians to feel that we are assisting a war against them.
You're bringing actually a very interesting point.
Sure.
This was going to be our last question.
Okay.
You brought a very interesting point. Our relation with the American armed forces,
Right.
the fact that Haifa is basically a home port for them.
Right.
The US gives Israel $4 billion a year
Right.
in military aid.
Right.
What is the liberal view on this?
Right, so the liberal view on this, unlike some of the issues that we addressed before, is very clear, and I like to think that every classical liberal in Israel is quite aware of this. This is something that needs to stop, the military aid. It's not really something that's the idea of people in Israel, as I said, on many issues, they don't really see the alternatives. They see the foreign aid money, the military aid coming in, and they think that this is the standard, and they don't question it in any way. So it's not really something that politicians discuss. But I would like to point out here the views of Moshe Feiglin, which is an ex-member of parliament who strongly opposes the military aid, and so do I. And I'd like to think that this is really a very clear classical liberal issue. Any person who portrays views on this that are different from the views that I am showing now, in my opinion, those are not classical liberal views. The funding definitely should stop for several reasons. First of all, the market is built on signals, and the Israeli industry finds itself being quite harmed by the fact that they can't compete with things that are imported. So not only are they imported, they're free. So we see all sorts of things like importing the import of they have a certain amount of money that they have to spend, and there's a period of time that they can spend it. So if there's any surplus at the end of the time, obviously they have to spend it, so they spend on all sorts of idiotic things, like Harley Davidsons for the military police. I'm not sure if you heard of it, but yeah, they bought those a few years back, and first of all, I think it really it's not good for the relationship with the American government, with the American people for sure. Because first of all, the $4 billion is really not so much money. It used to be a lot of money because the Israeli economy has really been booming in the time between the.
Yes, today it's actually 1% of the Israeli government's budget.
Yes. No, I don't think so. If it's $4 billion, it's $4 billion, and I think it's more like 4%. It's more
okay,
like 4%. Yeah. So, but anyway, it should be pointed out. What happened is in the early 80s, Israel has been going through all sorts of, funnily enough, pushed by the American government, but all sorts of policies towards free markets, less government spending. Since the early 90s, and really the economy has been responding the way we said it would, and the way we say it will, and it's really been booming. But the military aid has not been attached to the way our economy is headed. So it used to be really a lot of money, and now it's a part of our. Of the spending of the Israeli government, which is really not as big as we'd like to think. As I said, it also damages the signal system because it enables them to mostly import things for free, which is not a good thing. And lastly, you do have to keep in mind that, first of all, it's not free money. It's not that there's $4 billion that is transferred to the account of the Israeli government every year. As you said, it's military aid, and people don't know, but the contract is limited in a variety of ways. Obviously, the reason that we have this is it has to do with the arms producer lobby in the United States. They have their own agenda, and this is a way for them to get money from the American government.
This is actually an American government subsidy to the American arms companies, manufacturers.
Yes.
And the Americans don't like to say that they're subsidizing their industry. So what they do is they give it to other countries, a lot of it to Israel, but to other countries
yes.
as well.
Israel gets the most per country, but if you look at all of the money that's given, you have to keep in mind that Israel stands alone in a war against a few countries. So we find that the countries that they subsidize on the other side, if you take it to sides, the other side actually gets more money. So but that's not none of our business.
That's none of our business, but it's a classical subsidizing of an arms race.
It is.
Subsidizing both sides.
It is. They're subsidizing their own industry, and obviously anyone who knows anything about economics knows that this is something that doesn't make any sense. But they're doing that. But you have to keep in mind that because of the fact that it's oriented towards the American arms industry, there's a lot of really strange clauses to that contract that are not to the best interest of the Israeli security. For instance, people don't know that, but anything developed with the military aid money from the United States can be taken by the United States. The technology is just pull out of the project.
Yeah, we don't have the commercial rights
to anything produced with that money. That's right. But it's not only that. They can also go to a project midway. You know, if they see a certain system that they like, they take it and now it's theirs. So there's that. There's also the fact that the things that we buy, because they're meant to subsidize the arms industry, the contract is built in a way that it prevents competition. So that means that, for instance, if we buy Jeeps and then we finish using them and we want to sell them, we're not allowed to sell them. The law, the rule of the contract says that once you finished using something that you bought with foreign aid, you have to destroy it. You can't sell it. And so there's that. And there's also the fact that it's used as a leverage against us to prevent us from having arms deals with many states, like for instance India and also China. So that's something that the Americans use in order to get leverage against us, for us to not trade arms with other countries and compete with them. Because on many technologies we find that we are quite competitive with American arms companies. Specifically, if you look at the fact that nowadays there's so much technology that goes into weapons. Obviously, it's becoming more and more of a technological thing. So yeah, so I'd say definitely you have to cut the military aid either on our side or on their side, but it has to stop.
Even if they continue to subsidize the countries around us, even if they continue to subsidize declared enemies.
Yes, definitely yes. First of all, what I say has to do with what policies I believe Israel should have, and countries and the relations of Israel with other countries. This is not about me telling the US how to handle itself. If the American government wants to keep subsidizing Egypt and Pakistan and all sorts of countries that are aggressive towards us, that's their own problem. I mean, I don't think that it makes any sense. It doesn't benefit. There's something that there's a bit of a joke on this, because the money that they send there, obviously, those are very corrupt countries. So that money also is something that probably the ruling class enjoys a bit more. And I think that they're really, it doesn't do any kind of benefit to either of the sides. But if the American government thinks it's a good idea, it's their decision to make.
Okay, so thank you very much, David.
Thank you for interviewing me. Thank you.
מצוין, תודה.
תודה לך.